Yeah, I found some other really cool music. So just on the music stuff, and I think this is a good part of the conversation, there was some really cool music in that Microsoft tool
Hmm.
that was a little bit more upbeat and modern compared to the other stuff that I found was sort of like quite epic and like, questy, for want of a better word. So we've got to figure out what we want want there. But I think the name will help
That
that.
reminds me of something, the hero's journey, which is a cycle of the hero's journey in a book, where
Yeah.
they end up, I can't remember the exact cycle, but essentially it goes something like, they have this awakening or awareness, they end up going on the journey, they end up getting smashed, they go through some hard time, and then they grow and they develop and they come to the pinnacle and they overcome their challenge. And
Yeah.
there's a cycle, but it's called the hero's journey. I can't off the top of my head remember it, but the hero's journey is quite a cool name. Quite like that.
Yeah. Was that a movie?
No,
Oh,
it's a reference to overcoming challenge, and it kind of what happens in movies and stories, with a
yeah.
character.
Yeah.
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 It's more of a template or a principle, a cycle of someone's journey.
Yeah. Oh, I
From
like that.
from beginning to overcoming the challenges and winning
Yeah.
and having triumph and so forth.
I like that, man. The hero's journey. That's cool. So yeah, so
Mm.
that sort of leads onto our conversation about why we're here, right? So we've toyed with the name of like becoming men, or like what was the one the other day which we had, which was pretty cool, was
I am man.
I am man,
We
or
are men. Yeah,
we are
something like that.
men.
Yeah.
The hero's journey is quite cool too, because if you strip it back, like
Mm.
ultimately if we show up as real in our true self, as men that have gone through that journey and like worked hard to be, you know, where we are and showing up powerfully in a way,
Mm.
we're showing up as a hero. Like I look at my dad, he was my hero. Like if I look back in my life, yes, there's stuff obviously, pros and cons in any relationship, but I watched what he did and he was my hero growing up. So
Yeah.
he showed up in that space in a way that allowed me to feel that. Interesting,
It's
huh?
interesting, isn't it? I think there's an innate attachment and an innate draw to see your dad in that light. I think
Mm,
even people that have had fathers that have been quote unquote assholes or whatever,
mm, mm.
they there's still that affinity, that built-in biology and that connection, that this is my dad, and that
Yeah.
love that that's just there. It's just there, and it doesn't matter, if they've done something that's horrific or horrible.
Yeah.
There's that still that like part of that kid that just wants to love their dad or love their mum.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Hmm.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Warts and all, eh?
Yeah.
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 I was talking to someone about this yesterday. It's actually interesting. It was in a coaching context. I can't recall. I can't recall exactly where it was, but you do your best as a conscious parent. You're trying to obviously look at where the potential traumas have been formed, or you're trying to show up the best way you can, and you're trying to consciously form
Mm,
good habits, good attachments, and good perceptions for your kids, so that they have good beliefs around money, they have good beliefs around self and self-love. And I'm just aware of all these things, and you try and instill the
mm,
things particularly that you perceive that you didn't have when you were growing up, where those
mm.
voids were, drive your value and going, well, I want to put this in place.
Yeah.
But the realization is that it doesn't matter how hard you try, you fuck your kid up some fashion or form, like, because you just do.
Yeah.
As part of the matrix, as part of the game that we live in,
Yeah.
as part of the human experiences. No
Mm,
matter what you do, your kid is going to attach
mm.
to some of these things in a way that wasn't intended or you were blind to,
Yeah.
and it's going to mess them up some way, somehow.
Yeah.
That's at that, and it has to be. It has to happen. Those
I,
challenges, those perceived negatives have to be there, because we
yeah.
live in a world of duality.
100%. 100%. I think that's the realization that, work journeying through the work I've done, with you specifically, and looking into myself and looking at, examining that father son, mother son relationship, and,
Mm-hmm.
some of the issues that or the, um, buttons that get pushed now,
Yeah.
for example, the towel one, which we could talk about potentially later on as a good example, that button gets pushed, but realizing that's actually a button that goes back to when I was a child, it's kind of like, whoa, and working through that and kind of getting peace in that and healing that, knowing that that's button's possibly always going to get pushed, but when it gets pushed, instead of reacting, I can choose to respond powerfully, like that hero's journey. Been here before, I've seen this boss before, I know how to defeat it, as opposed to getting smashed and sitting there trying to clock and go, and spazzing out, um yeah, but the realization with that comes that our kids, or my kids, no matter how powerfully I show up, as you said, there's always going to be, but it's part of their journey, their hero's journey, as a young woman, as a young man. And that's just, the growth opportunities that we're dealt, I suppose, maybe for want of a better word.
Yeah, it's interesting because even though, I've been kind of in this work and in this field for a while, I still caught myself at times trying to not wrap in cotton wool, but would I say protect? Like trying to inadvertently, protect or stop shit from happening to my son.
Yeah.
And I guess there's, when you can see something that's coming, like it's natural. You want to mitigate risk. You want to put things in place.
Yeah.
But it was that catching myself. It was like a blind spot of going, fuck, you can't stop everything, and just acknowledging that and going, it just can't. Yeah. And they need this challenge. So even though I understood, and I'd share, challenge is required for growth. You don't get growth without challenge. There's this kind of innate parent part that comes out going, oh shit, I've got to stop that from happening. And you kind of forget in the moment because you're like, you don't want to see your kid go through pain. And then you've got to remind yourself, actually, that pain is a gift and a blessing.
Yeah.
With what they're going through, So it's an interesting seesaw, a tightrope that you walk as a parent in that regard.
Oh, definitely. Like, yeah, and that even a practical element of seeing a kid, grapple, like my son the other day was, this morning actually, had a wee toy and he was trying to sort of connect it together, that classic scenario where as a dad, you're a fixer or you're, so just having that awareness of going, well, actually just let him have a go himself. Yeah. And either he'll crack it, and I can celebrate that with him rather than jumping in, or if he's struggling, excuse me, being a teacher as opposed to just jumping in and doing it for him, you know? Yeah. But you're talking about obviously on an emotional level as well, it's quite powerful.
It's interesting you bring that up too, because that's something I'm very mindful of as well. So my dad, he was a hands-on man, similar to your dad, that especially that generation, the baby boomer generation, born between 46 and 64. And you look at them and, they were that industrial kind of, get shit done, hands-on. And because he was geared that way, it was interesting. He'd just take care of everything. And he had that whole attitude of, do it right, do it yourself. Yeah. So growing up, then he would just, if something he asked me to do, I didn't do it fast enough, he'd just get in and do it. And then I'd feel like, I'd lost the opportunity, or I'd just like, just kind of fuck it. I'll just let him do it then. And so that led to me then not picking those pieces up to do things myself so much, because I relied on him to take care of it. There was no kind of drive for me to do. And so that's one of the things that I've really taken on with my son is, even if he's struggling with something, is just to still let him go through, still let him do it, so that he accomplishes it himself and then gets that sense of achievement, and then really wires his neurology into going, well, I can actually do this. I can do this for myself. I can work stuff out. And it's through that demonstration of allowing him to do it that really instills that belief system versus just taking over and doing it yourself. Even though sometimes you're frustrated and you're like, fuck, I want to get this done, running out of time. And obviously you can't get it right every time, but the majority of the time I'll try and make sure that that's what I'm doing for him. So
100%, man, that's massive. My dad was exactly the same. And
Yeah.
I felt that I failed so it was interesting. What comes up for me is when you said, if I didn't get it done in the right time,
Yeah.
in the amount of time, and he would just step in and do it for me, I felt like I had failed him in a way, as in like, I had to step in and complete that for me or do it for me. And so that's what sort of came up for me.
Mm-hmm.
But also a sense of relief that it was done for me too. So it was creating creates sort of a bad cycle, doesn't it? Where one, you feel not good enough sort of thing.
Mm.
But then secondly, you just, if I don't do it, dad will get it done or whatever, and it was weird because I had this sort of perfectionism thing going on as well, which was actually tied up into stuff with my mum, I think. so I was stuck into this place of like, wasn't getting it done because I was too perfectionist. But then if I didn't get it done on time, I felt like I'd failed dad. And you know what I mean? It's just this weird stuff, man. And so just this ongoing cycle.
Yeah, you get to, it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You kind of peel the layers back and get to see the patterns that play out as to how you showed up and associated to different situations.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, I can relate to the whole perfectionism thing with the critical parent, critical mum. So I had the same. And so, you're right. It's like, well, then you end up battling yourself because you're battling this critic that you end up adopting and taking on, even if they're not there, because that's what you're used to.
Yeah.
And so then it puts you into freeze mode when it comes to actually doing something.
Yeah.
You're like, shit. Oh, is that going to be good enough? Is that going to get it right? What if I don't quite get it this way? Oh, I should be this way. And then you're frozen. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. And they don't realize it came from having a really overcritical parent. And even though the parent may not be there still, they become their own parent. They become their own criticizer.
100%.
And it's like, fuck, this just feels familiar. This is what I'm used to.
Yeah. I had a car like that I was doing up back in the day, an old Toyota Corolla, with the hot wire mags on it, and it was awesome. And I prepped it down and got mates to help me, and we sanded that beast, and it was so smooth, undercoated it, sanded it back down. And I was just paranoid to top coat it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I just couldn't bring myself to spray the final coat, the red on the top.
Right.
Because I was just too perfectionist. I was too worried about getting runs in it or screwing it up,
So instead of doing it at all, it was just easier to...
Dad stepped in and he was like, I want to get this thing out of my workshop. Or paint it on this day, and he stepped in and did it, right? So it's that exact cycle playing out, I just want to raise
How old were you when that happened?
Oh, I would have been 20, 20, yeah. I want to say 20, yeah. Maybe a little bit younger, 19, 20. So it was, that has come in, like I've had to, around the perfectionism stuff, I've had to let that go. And I found actually also having kids was really helpful for me. With kids, you just can't be perfectionist, you have to get shit done and off you go, I think the key thing though that we shouldn't forget, and obviously for people listening, is that, we've talked about like critical mom and perfectionism with dad and all that sort of stuff, is that that's part of the lesson that makes us where we are now. And I really like the part where you talk 100%. About jumping on the magic carpet and looking back at your past and going, look at all the amazing achievements and things that
guided meditation.
Have achieved as a result of feeling that way. So there's always that balance. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really important for listeners to understand that there is a kind of balance to this conversation and not a way out, but a way to reconciling it, I suppose. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially what you're talking about is, with every crisis, there's a blessing. Yeah. Every challenge, there's a gift, and without those, if you talk about the criticism, for example, if I go back and look at mine and just use a real life example, and again, it's perception, right? Now it's because reality is perception. So if you perceive that, you had a critical parent, in which case I perceived I had a critical parent, particularly in the mother figure, what that ended up doing for me was, you could say the negative, I'm using, inverted commas for those that can't see, but the perception was it was negative. It was this, it did this to me, it debilitated me, it had me second guess, you kind of can stack up all these things and you're conscious of all that side.
Yeah.
But on the other side, that, I wasn't conscious of initially, that took me in time to then look back and reflect on, was that it taught me how to really rationalize with myself, try and rationalize with someone else, taught me how to navigate someone that was being that way or not being rational, so that I could like learn different strategies and tactics and like, what if I come in this way? What if I do this?
Yeah.
And so it made me really resourceful when dealing with people and having to learn to have behavioral flexibility to get the outcome that I wanted. And to then also go into learning about, personal development, about how we work, human behavior, communication. So it sent me, and if I zoom out and look at the big picture, it sent me on a massive mission of discovery, self-discovery, and understanding people, which then took me into the line of work I'm in, which is, in human behavior and consulting and coaching and stuff. So without that, I can say I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing here today. And so therefore, often our biggest challenge that we look back on ends up being our greatest gift. So often, it's birthed from the perceived pain, perceived challenge.
There you go. I think that's magic. I think, as you just said, is that you wouldn't be who you are or where you are now.
Totally.
And there's always balance, and for some reason, as kids, we attach ourselves to the negative element of that perception of, say, the criticism, and that has a challenging impact in our lives. But the positive is that we probably wouldn't be here talking the way we are now without our experiences growing up.
Totally. It's an interesting one, this one too. I was thinking about this the other day. I was pondering on it because I was like, for so long, I think, I've talked about, you and I've bounced off about doing a podcast or a channel or putting content out for ages, right? Like it's been a long time. And I've been coaching now. I've been speaking and coaching for 16 odd years and niched into this area for about 9 years. And I've never really put content out. I've never really thrust myself out there. I'm happy to speak on stages, but for whatever reason, there was always some kind of block to start recording, put stuff online. I don't know, I haven't quite put my finger on what that aspect was about the online part. But it came down to the criticism. And so it came down to my high self-critic. And going, fuck, what if I put something out there and it's not quite right? And so it's just like you with just like you with the hood of the car or the spray paint. It was like, oh, it's easier just to not do it, because then I don't have to criticize myself or be criticized. So it's just, I just won't do it. And so it shows up. And here's the interesting piece for me that I realized is that for me to step into where I want to step into and reach more people and empower more people, I had to face the very thing that was in that particular area of my gift, because I had no problem coaching one-on-one and showing up and standing for people and doing all that. But I had to get over that piece and allow myself to be fully exposed in a sense and put myself out there. But it was dealing with the very essence of where the criticism was wrapped up in.
Interesting.
Right. It was that piece there. It was the very essence of my battle or struggle to move through to allow me then to evolve as a coach, because it was directly related.
That's so interesting. And I saw you, the years grapple with that journey. And it's funny, actually, I've seen a number of coaches, the same sort of thing. They go to build a website and then have a freak out halfway through about, oh, is it good enough? What does it, portray me correctly? And what am I really about? And then all of a sudden I'm going to be vulnerable. And, it's really interesting. Like I'm acutely aware of the lighting on my face at the moment. One side's light, one side's dark, and it's driving me nuts, right? But it's
little beautiful. Critical... It's showing duality, dark and light.
But you know what I mean? Like it's a constant thing. But I think the key point you made was pushing through, and that for that greater purpose. What is the greater purpose and vision? That you want to achieve, and sometimes obviously it's a scale, isn't it, that balancing act, so if it's like something critical or urgent, the urgency just overcomes that feeling straight away and you respond. Say something happens to a child instantly we respond and get the stuff done. But when it's more of a sort of process, like you're saying about putting yourself on camera, starting a podcast, there's a lot more wiggle room,
Yeah.
and procrastination and all that
Oh,
can,
big
that
time.
can come through. So what was the key thing though that you found you did that actually got you to the position where you feel comfortable, like jumping on the podcast today, for example, and actually, publishing this content?
That's that's a big question, because
Mm.
if you look at it as a combination of a lot of time, work,
Yeah.
peeling layers off things.
Yeah.
But if I boil it down, to all the different time and energy that's gone into working on myself and trying to uncover blind spots, which is an ongoing process. It's one that continues, as long as you've got that philosophy that you're wanting to do that. It was the integration of duality. It was the integration and the ownership and integration of those parts, and honoring those parts and realizing that they're going to show up, they're there, but giving them some love and some empathy and some compassion, those parts, and essentially bringing them back into myself and going, okay, they're there, they're going to show up, and they're going to show up anytime I'm stretching myself to do something new. So it was changing the relationship with those parts and honoring them for what they were, and allowing them without gaslighting myself and going, oh, I'm just going to fucking bury that or try and ignore that or just put it off. It was like, no, okay, there it is. There it is. I'm going to acknowledge it, okay, that's how I feel. That's where it is.
Yeah.
All right. What does it need? What does that part need from me right now?
Yeah.
And then just really finding a home for them and redefining the relationship with self and all those different parts.
So essentially what you're saying is that those feelings, or that they don't go away, but you've adopted a series of tools or process to kind of be aware when that comes up, like the fear comes up or vulnerability or whatever.
Totally.
But now you can, you're empowered enough to actually go, hey, I see you. I see that and I feel that. It's safe to feel that. And then you process that through and get on with it anyway. As opposed to just procrastinating on it, for example.
Yeah, and it's the acknowledgement too. And I used to have, it's interesting, right? I used to have this expression, I don't know where I got it from, but if I ever start to feel uncomfortable, it just means I've just gone out of my comfort zone. I'm about to stretch and grow again.
Yeah.
And so it's just a reminder of that. And so, for us now, we've started putting this content out. Like, we said the other day, we set the camera up in my office here. We started recording, and I knew, and you probably knew, that this is not going to be the best quality because we're just trying. We've got this camera. I don't know if this camera's fucking working well or not, but there was a real difference in the relationship with that process now too. It would have been, oh, fuck, Joel. Oh man, this is not going to be good. Oh, what about this? And I used to get stuck in all of that. And I remember back when we used to work together ages ago, it was like that. And it was painful. It was painful. And so then it changed to, like, when I think about the process that we started now, it's like, okay, I fucking know, and that this is not going to end up being the best version, but you don't get the best version without just fucking starting somewhere. And so it was going, you know what, I'm just going to fall in love with that process, accept that for what it is, use it for what we can use it for, and roll with it. And it's a completely liberating way of looking at things.
Yeah. I like that. That's so key. So for men, and women or people that are listening, like, because obviously this podcast for us is about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we feel obviously as men that we have a lot to share with other men and provide a platform for other men to dialogue, to explore, and to share.
Yeah.
But obviously not, isolating that just to men. Obviously, if there's people, women, other people that want to listen, of course, great. But there's something about being a man and going through that hero's journey as a man, and the different elements of fatherhood, running a business, earning an income, impacting the community, whatever it might be, we can share with. So, I really want to make sure that people that are listening that might be sort of I don't like to say sitting on the fence, but, or yeah, maybe they've been sitting on the fence on an idea or something for a long time, like what we've been just talking about with the podcast, where they've had opportunities to, I mean, New Zealand, we have the tall poppy syndrome. I was talking to someone the other day, I can't remember what country they were from, but it was, it might have been with you, and there's something else that they called it. It was in South Africa, or I can't remember now, but there was the same sort of thing, and the person was talking about, and I thought, one, we've got all this sort of stuff from growing up, but then when we often, as men, try to do something new or step out of our comfort zone, that fear comes up as, what will my peers think? What will my friends think? What will my colleagues think? Will I lose my job over it? A worst case scenario, is someone going to try and cut me down or whatever? So, it could be as simple as just turning up and volunteering for something in the local community. I mean, it could be something as out there, I suppose, as setting up a podcast,
What do interesting. Can I just, I'll jump in with that, because I experienced this the other day with someone who showed a level of vulnerability, and got to see some blind spots about themselves and a realization. Yeah. And they were going to put a post up on Facebook, and they sent it to me first just to say, hey, what do you think of this? If I post this, does it make me look weak? And it was because they had really honored and acknowledged part of their journey and part of where they were responsible for their own pain and the realization of that. And I thought, when I read it, I was like, wow, that's like really insightful. That shows there's a really valuable lesson and clarity that's been gained. And I sent a message back saying, I think that actually shows some real, like, in the vulnerability and this authenticity of you being really honest with yourself. Putting that out there. And so I thought that was great. And so, but then they posted and pulled it down. They were concerned because they were going for a job somewhere, that someone might read that on their Facebook page that was, researching them. And it was really interesting, right? Because when I look at that, even if I had been an employer, I would have, but again, this is through my lens, right? I would have looked at that and gone, fuck, that person's actually just really in touch with themselves. They've really understood themselves, and they've got a level of authenticity. And I think when you come from that place of being, this is kind of linking back to where you were, where you're like, you can just sit and really own where you're at and be honest about it, and be honest with that shadow part and acknowledge it, and fully go, yeah, fuck, it's there. And I have this part in me. With that drops the facade. It drops the need to try and be that one-sided individual, and then living a lie. So whatever you're, resisting persists. Whatever you try and repress has to express somewhere. Whereas the more you try and bury it and push it down, you've kind of in this push-pull, and because you've got shame around it, then when it comes up, you get triggered and you react a certain way. And that's where the inauthenticity leads to feeling out of sorts. It leads to feeling like you're being exposed because you've tried to hide something. But if you fully own it and go, yeah, fuck yeah, that's just part of me, then that doesn't touch you. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't affect you. So it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, because you're comfortable with it inside yourself.
That's key. Yeah, that's a key 100%. Point. Because you're all, there's always going to be criticism.
Totally.
Potentially, well, we just talked about the tall poppy syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's tall poppy criticism, political criticism, colleague criticism, whatever it is, I think, part of the hero's journey, in my mind, I'm talking about me now, about my life, is actually getting to the point where I'm comfortable in my own skin and going, actually, this is who I am. And yes, all of those little things come up, that challenges and like, oh, what will people say, or the fear or criticism or whatever, as you know. Excuse me. But it's it's just getting to that point where it almost brings like an inner peace in a way, doesn't it? Yeah. It's like a grounding, a posture thing where you just sort of get to the space. Yeah.
Yeah, you're shedding a light on your shadows. You're owning your shadows. And if you've got pain around those particular things, or you're avoiding those parts of you, when those parts do get exposed, like I touched on before, that's where it's like, fuck, your defense mechanisms kick in, the shame
Yeah.
kicks in, or the
Yeah.
guilt kicks in, or, and the need to cover up, the need to deflect, point the finger at someone else,
Yeah.
try and get it off you, blame someone else for something, and so versus just going, yep, yeah, I can own that. It's like, it's funny, the guy that came around this morning to help with the blinds, he was pretty conscious. We had a bit of a chat and we talked about the scamdemic over the last few years and talked about, I said, he said something about common sense. And I said, oh, you make it sound like common sense is a regular commodity these days. And I said, I kind of question that. So I kind of opened up that conversation. Anyway, we got joking around and that. And I said, oh, look at that. And you're the right height to do this job too. Put the blinds up. I said, I'm probably not quite tall enough to be doing this with the ease that you are.
Yeah.
And he's like, he laughs and that. And then I said, do you want me to give you a hammer there? He goes, oh, do you reckon you can reach? And I had a chuckle. And he says, isn't that, he turns around and he goes, isn't that good that we can just kind of make jokes about each other and be okay with it?
Yeah.
And that was exactly, that there was exactly the point we're kind of talking about, is that if you can make fun of yourself, not in a self-deprivation way, but laugh about those parts of yourself or whatever comes up, and you're okay with it, then again, the outside world's just a reflection of your inner. And so if you're comfortable with it and you can have a chuckle or have a laugh or accept it, then that's what you're going to receive externally.
Yeah. Oh, big time. And that was a big piece for me, actually, with the sort of critical, element growing up, and then also grew up overseas. So there was often a bit of hounding and a bit of grilling because I was different, and so but it wasn't water off the duck's back. It was definitely, it definitely penetrated, for want of a better word, and definitely impacted, So that was a big piece that I remember breaking down actually with you in a session around. Yeah, it was quite interesting. So it was a really valuable piece. So without, I mean, it's probably a whole nother, podcast or probably a whole nother session to talk about that. But I think it's well worth, that topic actually, is how to get to the point where you're comfortable with banter. I suppose is a better word, that sort of like social criticism and banter, and that, and it can get a little bit nasty and it can kind of be jovial, but just navigating that sort of space, I think is quite a good topic.
You mean the banter that's kind of slung at you, that's needling away at, like,
the needling banter
aspects of you, like kind of critical banter, take the piss out of,
but also the tall poppy element as well. So all of that stuff woven through, like the whole, sometimes I find that banter can actually just be a cesspool of like all this shit we're just talking about. Everyone's got their shit going on in this little cesspool, and it's like, let's chuck out a fishing rod and see who can hook today, and it's heaps of fun. But I suppose for me, I didn't actually grow up in a culture that where that happened a lot, but it happens a lot in New Zealand.
Yeah,
I've noticed, and it's part of that sort of Kiwi bloke banter sort of thing, and I've learned to navigate that and stuff. But it's quite an interesting space.
It definitely is. We definitely are more geared that way. To kind of have the negative, Whereas I look at, having gone to the States quite a number of times over the years, and dealt with a lot of people over there and have friends over there. Definitely, if you look at a generalization of, say, America to here, there's definitely more uplifting, toward focus, the positive so-called focus of things, of uplifting versus here, 100%. And I'll never forget seeing, I think I've shared this with you, but I went to a seminar of Brad Sugar's years ago. And he talked about driving his, Lambo or his Ferrari in Australia, for example, where it's the same there. And he says, he'd drive his car there, he'd pull up to the lights. He said, guys would pull up next to him and go, "Oh, you fucking wanker," and pull the fingers and stuff like this to him. And he said, do the same thing in Vegas, whatever, in a Lambo or Ferrari, he'd pull up at the lights, car would turn up with a couple of guys next to him. Like, "Oh man, that's awesome. How did you do that?" Or "Congratulations." He said it was just like night and day as far as the way that people received it.
I think that's this is going to be a great topic to unpack. Like, I think secretly that in New Zealand, like it's kind of, I'm almost like a sort of third party observer, but I'm not. Like I'm a Kiwi, but growing up for sort of, 9, 10 years overseas, coming
Yeah.
back into that was really interesting to observe. It is like everyone does kind of, I think, want that. And a lot of people actually have it and or achieve it, but quiet
Mm.
achievers and don't sort of raise their head too much for fear of getting chopped down. So it's
Yeah.
this quite interesting thing playing out. And I mean, we could unpack it for Africa, but yeah, without getting too much on top, it'd be good. Too much off topic. It would be good to come back to that topic at some stage.
For the reasons why, you
Um,
mean, like why it's like that way, or
yeah, just unpack it a wee bit, and I can share a little bit more about my journey and how I've sort of navigated through it. But I think the key takeaway was just getting comfortable in my own skin, no matter what culture I'm in, whether
yeah,
it's New Zealand culture, overseas culture, or whatever. Just being who I am. And obviously, sometimes you have to adjust slightly to not offend, because something's culturally different, and that's fine. But
mm,
it's just being comfortable in your own skin to be who you are, to be who I am, no matter what the culture or setting is,
yeah,
and I think people see that and feel that. I don't know about you, but the more I've become comfortable in my own skin and in sharing authentically, the more opportunities seem to open for me as well,
oh, big
to
time.
speak here, to lead here. Almost too much stuff comes through. I'm not always talking about money making opportunities. I'm just talking about opportunities that can impact people. The more I
Yeah, well,
turn
yeah,
up,
opportunity to lead, right? Like you're
yeah,
talking
to
about
lead.
leadership, because you
Exactly. Yeah.
first, you
Yeah.
can't lead anyone else until you can first lead yourself,
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
you're talking about self-governance, self-leadership in a way, and
Yeah.
again, the more comfortable and the more you heal and integrate those parts, those shadow parts, the duality
Mm.
in you, then the bigger you can expand, the
Yeah.
bigger you can go.
Yeah.
Because those parts, as we said, don't go away. The
Yeah.
criticism, the shadows.
Yeah.
But as you expand, they're just going to rise, because
Yeah.
each expansion you kind of get used to that level. It becomes a new comfort zone. So
Yeah.
100%.
100%. Yeah.
You can't. It's
Snap.
Jax. Yeah, you can't grow until you're ready to face that kind of that next level
Mm.
up, so to speak.
Mm.
And that really comes back down to looking at
Mm.
within, you know. And it's
100%. Yeah.
interesting too, those
Mm.
as you get to see those triggers, those shadows that you've had, those triggers that come up are an invitation. This is something I just kind of said the other day to someone that really made sense, but it's an invitation to go in. If a trigger comes up, that's the opportunity to use that trigger. It's a sign. Instead of looking at something like, oh, that fucked me off, or this person
Mm.
annoyed me,
Mm.
it's actually a sign to go, hey, here's an opportunity. Here's an
Yeah.
opportunity for me to learn something else about myself I didn't know, and to actually get some growth from this. And
Yeah.
then it reframes, it gives you a completely new perspective and way of looking at getting
Yeah.
triggered, or
Ah,
uncovering these
definitely.
pieces you feel uncomfortable about.
Yeah.
So,
Ah, definitely. And I think, it's sort of for our listeners and watchers, one of the key things for me to kind of ground the conversation into a practical reality is like so many people I talk to, or we just see it in our world, are disillusioned by um, inauthentic leadership, put it that way,
mm,
and whether it be in politics and business and corporate, as you mentioned before, people shifting blame, pointing fingers. I mean, you look at any
mm,
politician when they're interviewed, learn how to divert, shift the topic off and wiggle around and come back through.
yeah,
Like imagine a world where there is authentic communication. Obviously all people are always going to be confronted by stuff and not always answer truthfully. But I think the key point for me, and one of the main reasons about becoming vulnerable and putting myself out there, is to create this dialogue with more men,
mm-hmm,
over the next 1, 2, 3, 10, 100 years, whatever it is, to help society, but men in particular, grow into that leadership role. you know, where
Mm-hmm.
where a community, whether it's in New Zealand, offshore or whatever, can look at a person and not necessarily put them on a pedestal, but go, actually, that guy, I can feel and I can sense that he's speaking the truth, and that,
Yeah.
yes, he's vulnerable, he's human, he's a man, he's not perfect, but he's willing to have a truthful, honest conversation
Yeah.
about a situation, either in the workplace, in the corporate, in the country, in the council, whatever it might be, and actually find the best way forward for everybody, you know, and collaborate on that level. Yeah, you know.
I think if you look at the leaders that make a massive impact, or whether it be in their family, their workplace, or their country, or whatever it is, at whatever level they're playing, it does come back to that authenticity. It comes back to, because people pick up on that. You feel the energy of someone, whether the people are attuned to understanding its energetics, because we're just energetic beings, and we receive that first before anything else. What we can feel whether someone's being authentic. I think it's just the time's changing very quickly, and I think we're seeing a lot of these old veils and these different ways of being that kind of did work and not going to work the same so much anymore. And it's not to say that people are losing traits or ways of being, because as you said, we're going to have still inauthentic communication, and there'll be times where I'm not even authentic. There'll be times that we're guarded, and you've got something up, and it's just subconscious in the moment because you're caught in it. You didn't have the chance to choose to act. You just reacted because you were caught off guard and you were not fully present. Whatever, that stuff's going to still happen, but if we look at it as a generalization and as a general state of being, I think that type of leadership's coming more and more into calling. And I look at some of the groups that I'm a part of now in my community that's starting to expand, especially over the last 3 years. With what we've been subjected to. It really kind of helped form these communities of people where like attracts like and are drawn to each other. And you're talking about that level of authenticity and level of consciousness. It's definitely expanding quickly. And these groups and the need and the calling for it is growing very rapidly.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really interesting to watch, even on social media, politics aside, just the conversation from all angles, no matter what, everyone has a different opinion, but it's really interesting how sort of authentic conversations coming through loud and clear, it's really interesting. So I'm glad we're embarking on this journey. I like that phrase, the hero's journey. To me, that also sort of conjures up the idea of like a quest, like a gaming quest almost, where you're sort of down this path and you have to, there's different battles, different bits and pieces come up, different chapters, which is like the work chapter, the family chapter, the athlete chapter, the gym chapter, the cold shower chapter, which we'll touch on later on. That's, using the different tools to overcome challenges,
It's quite cool, I look at the cold shower. It's amazing how many people, and this is one of the guys I love listening to, is Andrew Huberman. Amazing how many people have been listening to him now, and just all this information that's coming out now that helps to raise your vibration and to have you really honoring and understanding your body and your mind a lot better. There's a lot. It's like all this information that how we used to live, that or a lot of people used to use this, and tribes used to use a lot of this stuff that's just kind of had been taken away. And now it's interesting because it's all starting to come out, through the information age that we've come through, where we've had access to all like things at our fingertips. But people are now starting to go, wow, there's like, we've gone from this desiring comfort, realizing that comfort that we desired and that disempowerment led us to where we've been in the last few years, has now kind of come full circle, and we're going, actually, we can be, do, and have more, and there's ways of operating and showing up as a conscious human that we weren't privy to before, and people are really grabbing hold of it. A lot of people I'm talking to, again, whether it be cold showers, plunge pools, saunas, and I think you got the likes of all these different podcasts like Joe Rogan and all these other podcasts that have come out that have interviewed really interesting people, and reached millions and millions and had such a massive impact. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, definitely. Well, we've got 5 minutes to wrap up. So what if, for our listeners and viewers that are watching here, just to summarize, we've spoken a wee bit about the hero's journey and how individuals grapple with different elements along the way. And we've spoken about some tools that people can deploy, some awareness of the mother-son, father-son relationship and dynamics and perfectionism and all of those, procrastination, being vulnerable, leadership, moving into leadership, a more powerful way of leadership around authenticity. We covered quite a few elements. What would be one real practical step that we could leave listeners with today, that if they're kind of, going, whoa, this is awesome, where do I sort of start? What would be one thing you would suggest that they could start with, one simple thing they could start with to get this journey going for themselves?
The journey of self-discovery, the journey of like self-growth, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, if someone was sitting on the fence, because I think we talked a lot about that, haven't we, today, about, both of us in certain elements were sitting on the fence, but the realization is that wasn't wrong. It just was because who we are. Our journey to that point of time got us to the fence. Yeah. And that's, as we often say, is I shouldn't have been doing the podcast, or we shouldn't have been doing the podcast because we couldn't do the podcast because we weren't in that place at the time to be able to have the tools or the awareness to do it, Yeah. So if someone's sort of in that sort of stuck spot where they really want to set up that e-commerce business, they really want to homeschool their kids, they really want to run for parliament, they really just want to change their job, or they really want to, they're really just sick of, they want change, but they're stuck in that space. What's a real practical way for people to?
So one of the ways to do that is to look at the worst case outcome. If you were to try that task or that new business, and you were to, because again, wherever attention goes, energy flows. And so if you're putting all this energy into being fearful of it failing and not working, well, then that's what you're going to manifest. That's the timeline you're going to create. And then you're going to either not do it at all because you're concerned it's going to fail. Therefore, you've actually created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. Or you actually go, okay, well, what would be the worst thing that could happen? And then be okay with the worst case scenario. If you can get okay with where you are now, like actually be comfortable. I haven't done it yet because this is just where I am, and be okay with that. Because you can't change the immediate now because it's already been and gone. Yeah. So get comfortable with where you are now and accept it. And then go, okay, well, if I was to do this business or start this thing, what would be the worst case scenario for it to happen? Like if I was to fail, if that's what you're worried about, what would that look like? And then really like own that and go, okay, that's what it would look like. And this is what it would feel like. And then go, well, if that was to happen, what would be some of the benefits that would happen if I were to do that and fail? Yeah. And then start to, once you've become accustomed to this is what could happen. Yeah. And if it did happen, I can now see both sides of that. Then it's no longer unconsciously running you because you're fully aware of what could happen and you've balanced out your perception on it. And it's not polarizing you and having you in fear of actually that happening because you've accepted that possibly could happen. And if it did, it's not going to be so bad. Yeah. Nice. I like it. Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Because like let's be honest, man. Like just as I was doing, this has come up again. It's the duality in us: the fear of abandonment, the fear of loss, fear of loss of like whether it be social connection or people judging and going, "Oh, you guys weren't that good," or "This was this," or whatever. Yeah. And then the fear of consumption of being consumed and going, "Fuck, if I start this, I'm gonna have to stay committed," and geez, I'm gonna lose this, lose that. So these fears, these things always come up. Is what we're going to be talking about going to be received well? All that shit's going to come up. It just is. So again, it's just like going, okay, it's going to come up, but make a home for it, and understand if it does, that's just part of the journey, part of the process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love it. I think for me, the key thing is the realization that, realize that you're not alone, or that person's not alone, that the same
shit
there's
happens to
so
everyone.
many, there's so many leaders, there's so many athletes, there's so many people we would call successful, in inverted brackets, that are successful because they've learned to do what we just said, be aware of the fears come up or whatever it is, and then just embrace it, feel it, not ignore it, feel it, but go, okay, but then still step out and take that step, into that leadership role, into having that extra child, or, whatever it is. I mean, it's all elements in life, right? That where that comes up,
Yeah.
And then not alone. And obviously, I don't want to promise anything now, but our vision, obviously, for what we're doing is to create dialogue in a community. And at some stage, I imagine we'd see some sort of social media community birth out of this. I'm hoping, we'll see, where people can actually connect and talk authentically about these type of things and encourage each other. I've been in quite a few chat groups over the years, and mainly to do with businesses and bits and pieces, marketing groups and stuff. And it's really, really encouraging to be able to connect with people about the same an issue, or share or grow together. So, we're not going to force that. If that organically grows and comes to the fore, great.
I think they'll definitely come. 100%. Again, for me, it's just us really being authentic and creating value, having real conversations, based on experience, based on the journey of helping a lot of people over, the last 15, 16 years, and our own individual experiences in business and life, and, looking in the mirror. One of the hardest places to look, the mirror.
Definitely.